Why didn't Richard Boone attend John Wayne's funeral? It's a question that has lingered among classic film fans for years, not because of scandal, but because of the contrast between two iconic figures of the Western genre. Both men shaped the image of the American frontier on screen, yet they carried themselves very differently off it. Boone was known for his thoughtful, introspective nature, while Wayne embodied a larger-than-life public persona. Their absence from each other's personal circles was not entirely surprising to those who understood their personalities. Rather than pointing to a single dramatic reason, Boone's decision seems rooted in a blend of personal values, lifestyle choices, and circumstances at the time. To understand it fully, it helps to step back and look at who Richard Boone was, not just as an actor, but as a man who often preferred authenticity over expectation. The making of Richard Boone. Richard Boone's early life reveals a man shaped by both discipline and independence. Born into a family with strong historical roots, he carried a quiet sense of identity that later influenced his career. His path wasn't straightforward. He explored different jobs, served in the Navy during World War II, and only later committed himself fully to acting. This diverse background gave him depth and perspective, qualities that became evident in his performances. Unlike many actors who chased fame, Boone seemed more interested in mastering his craft and understanding human complexity. His training in New York helped refine his natural intensity, allowing him to bring a sense of realism to his roles. These early experiences didn't just build his career, they shaped his worldview, making him someone who valued substance over showmanship, a trait that would define many of his later decisions. A career built on depth and character. Boone's rise in Hollywood came through roles that demanded emotional weight and authenticity. Whether in television dramas or westerns, he brought a quiet strength to his characters that audiences found compelling. His portrayal of Paladin in Have Gun Will Travel remains one of the most memorable in television history, not because of flashy action, but because of its intelligence and nuance. Boone had a way of making even the toughest characters feel human, layered, and thoughtful. This approach set him apart in an era when many performances leaned toward clear-cut heroism. He wasn't interested in playing simple archetypes. He wanted to explore contradictions within people. This artistic philosophy extended beyond acting and into his personal life, influencing how he interacted with others and how he viewed the industry around him. A different kind of Hollywood personality. While many actors of his time embraced the spotlight, Boone maintained a more reserved presence. He wasn't drawn to glamour or publicity, and he often avoided events that felt overly performative. For him, acting was a profession, not a platform for constant visibility. This distinction made him somewhat of an outsider in Hollywood circles, where public appearances and networking often played a major role. Boone's preference for privacy wasn't about distance from people, but rather about staying grounded. He valued meaningful conversations and genuine connections over superficial interactions. This aspect of his personality helps explain many of his choices later in life, including his absence from high-profile gatherings. It wasn't unusual for Boone to step away from situations that didn't align with his sense of authenticity, even if others might have expected him to be present. Crossing paths with John Wayne. Richard Boone and John Wayne shared the screen and contributed to the same genre, but their approaches were notably different. Boone leaned toward introspection and complexity, while Wayne's appeal often came from his commanding presence and clear-cut roles. Despite these differences, they worked together professionally, delivering memorable performances that highlighted their contrasting styles. Their relationship, however, appeared to remain largely professional rather than deeply personal. They respected each other's place in the industry, but they moved in different circles and held different perspectives on life and art. This distance wasn't unusual in Hollywood, where collaboration doesn't always translate into close friendships. Understanding this dynamic is important because it suggests that Boone's absence at Wayne's funeral was less about conflict and more about the nature of their relationship. Life beyond Hollywood. In the later years of his life, Boone made a conscious decision to step away from the constant demands of Hollywood. He relocated and became more involved in local artistic and cultural activities, focusing on theater, writing, and teaching. This shift reflected a desire for a quieter, more meaningful lifestyle. He invested his time in community projects and shared his knowledge with aspiring actors, finding fulfillment outside the traditional entertainment spotlight. This period of his life highlights how he redefined success on his own terms. For Boone, it wasn't about staying visible in the industry. It was about staying connected to his passions and values. By the time of John Wayne's passing, Boone was already living at a distance from Hollywood's inner circle, both physically and emotionally, which likely influenced his decision not to attend major industry events. Personal values and private grief. One of the most defining aspects of Richard Boone's character was his belief in privacy, especially when it came to emotional matters. He wasn't someone who expressed grief publicly or participated in ceremonies that felt more symbolic than personal. Funerals, particularly those attended by media and large crowds, can sometimes become public spectacles. For Boone, mourning may have been something deeply personal, best experienced quietly rather than in front of cameras. This perspective doesn't suggest indifference. Rather, it reflects a different way of processing loss. People express respect and remembrance in various ways, and Boone's approach leaned toward introspection. His absence, therefore, may not have been a statement about John Wayne at all, but simply an extension of how he chose to handle moments of significance in his own life. Health and practical considerations. Another important factor to consider is Boone's health during that period. By the late 1970s, he was dealing with physical challenges that may have made travel and long public events difficult. While he continued to stay engaged with his work and community, his energy was likely more limited than in earlier years. Attending a high-profile funeral, especially one that involved travel and public attention, may not have been practical for him. Health decisions like these, even if it isn't widely discussed, combined with his preference for privacy and his distance from Hollywood, it becomes easier to understand why he might have chosen not to attend. Sometimes, such decisions are less about intention and more about circumstance. An independent spirit. Until the end, Richard Boone was known for thinking independently and making choices based on his own principles rather than public expectation. He didn't follow trends or feel compelled to act in ways that others might consider appropriate. This independence defined both his career and his personal life. If he felt that attending a public event didn't align with his beliefs or comfort, he was unlikely to do so simply out of obligation. This trait earned him respect as someone who stayed true to himself, even when it meant going against the norm. His absence from John Wayne's funeral can be seen as part of this larger pattern, a reflection of a man who lived authentically and made decisions based on personal conviction rather than external pressure. Understanding the absence. In the end, Richard Boone's absence from John Wayne's funeral wasn't the result of a single dramatic reason, but rather a combination of factors that defined who he was. His private nature, his distance from Hollywood, his personal values, and possible health considerations all played a role. Instead of viewing it as a deliberate statement, it may be more accurate to see it as a quiet, personal choice. Boone's life reminds us that not all respect is shown publicly, and not all relationships fit into expected narratives. Sometimes, understanding a person means looking beyond the surface and appreciating the subtleties of their character. In Boone's case, his absence speaks less about conflict and more about a life lived on his own terms, guided by authenticity and quiet integrity.